In 2019, Harley Quinn the animated series premiered, following DC's Harley Quinn navigate her life of crime without the Joker. It felt like a refreshing and fun animated venture from DC Studios and is one of my favourite animated shows. The dialogue is so well executed and keeps you on your toes. This is a typically violent and cuss-heavy show, but it's done meticulously to maintain a certain energy, and with craft. Basically, the show reinvents Harley Quinn. It fulfills upon the idea of Harley in a way that the Birds of Prey movie never did. She's no longer Joker's loyal pet and now has real agency. If I were to describe the Harley Quinn show, I'd say Harley has the line style of Deadpool and the energy of Fleabag. Its frenetic pacing is one of its highlights, only missing a beat for quieter character moments. Mostly the show highlights witty comebacks and dynamic animated action. The pilot does a great job of introducing Harley Quinn and getting us as an audience on board with where she's at. Harley is immediately mocked for having been under the Joker's thumb before the show showcases what she's made of. It's a great meta-commentary on Harley Quinn's character, because she tends to be utilised as sex appeal or someone submissive to the Joker in prior animated shows or prominently in the Batman Arkham games. For the most part in prior media, Harley's been used as a henchwoman to the Joker, all the while being portrayed as blind to the fact that she's being manipulated. This show finally gives Harley agency, conveying that she isn't defined by the Joker. The character is given full range as a protagonist and is no longer just an accompaniment to the Joker. This is Harley's show, and the Joker is character history Harley moves on from. That's not to say that the Joker isn't a brilliant character in the series, but it also puts a new slant on his character and shakes things up in a nice way. The show does well to play with familiar DC characters, but with a unique and intense comedic style that revitalises these iconic characters. At the beginning, Harley isn't immediately distanced from the Joker. We actually get to see her develop and realise her relationship with him is completely unhealthy. There are two key incidents which divides Harley from the Joker. One of them is when he fails to break her out of Arkham after a whole year of imprisonment, and the second is when the Joker chooses Batman to survive a pit of acid over Harley. It calls back to the huge character history between the two, but also the fact that the Joker is defined by the Batman's vengeance. This pushes Harley from the Joker, and she comes to realise that the Joker is more in love with Batman than her. It actually makes you wonder why so many people follow Joker when he treats them all terribly, but I suppose there's something to be said for an exciting personality that hides the cracks. For the first incident, Harley holds out hope for Joker's rescue for a long time before realising it's all in her head. Not only is Arkham where she realises this, but it's also where she meets Poison Ivy. Even more so than Harley, Poison Ivy has basically been a sex appeal villain in other media, with very little dimension or screen time. Poison Ivy acts as the voice of reason to Harley, unlike Joker's toxic influence. Ivy reminds Harley that she deserves someone way better than the Joker, and plants the seed of Harley's doubt in the Joker that makes the show so unique. Understandably, Quinn struggles to see that the Joker isn't right for her because he shaped her villainous origin, and she craves the unpredictable elements synonymous with the Joker. So Quinn really needed someone more rational to open her mindset. When Ivy breaks Harley out of Arkham, it really propels a thrilling new relationship. Indeed, the two become the heart of this show. Basically, Poison Ivy acts as the voice of the audience who knows the Joker's character so well. It admittedly takes a lot to break down Harley's perception of the mighty Joker, but once done, it allows her to explore new adventures. Harley is the only doctor that ever got through to Ivy, so it makes sense that she's now helping her. They're still supervillains, but we sympathise for them in new ways. Instead of being defined by their moral compass, their carefree attitude is relaxing to watch. We become invested in Harley and Ivy's dynamic. It starts to add depth and intrigue to these supervillains that wasn't there previously, and it doesn't take long before we are anticipating what the next step will be between these two moving forwards. After being dumped, Joker doesn't care about Harley, just what it meant to his egotistical reputation, so much so that he pretends he was about to break up with her. It's another big act from the Joker in a play at reverse psychology. Joker never cared for Harley, just what she made him feel like, and the power he felt with her under his grasp. That really defines the Joker as a character. The pilot really conveys how delicate the Joker is and his emotional fragility. Joker is always about him, so it makes sense for him to have that same attitude in this show, only to be opposed by Harley Quinn. Joker really works well as a character because he weaves in and out of the show when it works to add some spice to the series. It also makes a lot of sense for that selfishness to cause irreparable damage between him and Harley, who he treats as disposable. Whereas the Joker often gets away with these acts in other adaptations, he actually has repercussions present in this show, which is smart. His love is just an act, like much of his melodramatic persona. All the Joker, Harley and Ivy stuff I mentioned here all happens in just the first episode. We see Harley Quinn fundamentally grow in just the pilot, setting the show to a really strong start. Harley's arc in the first episode is something you'd expect in a full season of television, but it's executed well in just one episode, and it's not rushed. This really hooks you to see how things go with Ivy and Harley, while Joker's history looms in the background. It portrays an abusive relationship well, creating depth beyond the rapid-fire jokes. It's interesting to see what the Joker's up to when not plotting some mastermind plan. The Joker's still an open wound, and seeing him on public television is clearly irritating to Harley, as you'd expect. Joker basically gets all the fame and spotlight which keeps him in the back of her mind when trying to move on. Harley is a bit of a broken person, but she's on the road to recovery. It's really great to see Ivy go to such lengths to help Harley out. The status quo is changed and there's still plenty of characters to play with. One of my problems with the show is it implies Harley isn't going to be defined by the Joker, but then undermines that arc by constantly bringing him back in the show. We see Joker in every one of the first 4 episodes. It made some sense for the first and arguably second episode, but by the third, you realise the writers are simply enjoying writing the Joker. And I feel this eventually begins to undercut Harley as the protagonist, and the Joker just doesn't work as well as Harley because we've seen him countless times before. I begin to feel tired of the character, despite the great voice acting present. It could be a meta-commentary on the Joker inserting himself into the centre of any situation or media he's in, but that simply doesn't feel original or refreshing. Though Harley's the protagonist, this show uses a wide variety of DC characters to make the show feel richer and add more sides to the show beyond one single character. I think it's a very smart decision, and I know if I were a writer, I'd want to play with these iconic characters in new and exciting ways, as long as it wasn't to the detriment of the protagonist. In the show, I feel like the only character who's pretty normal is Batman. Batman's less easy to give ridiculous lines of dialogue, so he works well as an outsider character, reacting to these intense characters around him, basically being the only straight-laced character in a sea of animated chaos. It's really interesting to see the sides flipped, as Batman's typically the protagonist, but from our villain's point of view, he's the boring saviour imposing upon their criminal plans. The show also gives us a pretty big dose of Jim Gordon, a character that isn't typically prominent in Batman universe stories. Unlike Batman, Gordon is pretty wild in the show, really allowing his typically bland character more entertainment value. I feel like this show delivers upon a lot of the promise Gotham didn't by giving us more sides to this character. Gordon is portrayed as quite a wreck. If all we delved into was Gordon's work life, it probably wouldn't be very engaging. This show tackles Gordon struggling with his mental health as his marriage is going through a rocky patch, impairing his workability. Gordon just wants someone to listen, but Batman's too emotionally distant to care. It's great to give Gordon more than just his occupation, and it tackles some character stuff that feels pretty important. Just like the early stuff between Harley and Joker, it has a lot of genuine heart behind it, despite the image of Gordon talking to Clayface's hand being hard to take seriously. Clayface may be on the side of the villains, but he offers a literal hand to Gordon in counselling, showcasing depth in the character. Notably, Season 2 has a lot more Gordon, which is fantastic. Gordon's still that very sad version of himself, and he's now dropping into alcoholism, which offers a struggle to overcome. Gordon's trying to hold Gotham together, but with Batman gone, it's not an easy task. Nonetheless, Gordon keeps trying to do the right thing and is very determined. It's pretty ironic that he has more of an arc than the protagonist, meaning I gravitate more towards his character in the second season. The show also doesn't focus on him for too long, so his scenes never get tediously drawn out, spaced out perfectly for my tastes. At college, Barbara and Ivy come across Jim Gordon and his daughter, Barbara. In Season 1, Jim Gordon only got to show off his work-life persona, so it's only natural here to see his family life and build up Barbara Gordon. Barbara is allowed to show off her detective skills as we see some of her heroic origins, setting up further stuff between her and Gordon to work out. Batman was Gordon's saviour in the first season, so with him gone, it's Barbara who's holding him together. We also get to see Jim Gordon reunited with Batman eventually. However, Barbara has already made a name for herself as Batgirl in his absence. It's a very sweet story that Barbara conveys her Batgirl persona was inspired not by Batman, but Jim Gordon, and to see Jim Gordon clean himself up for his daughter. These two characters working against Gotham's criminal element is a pretty heartwarming story. A lot of these extreme characters really wouldn't work in live action, but the animated media just offers a lot to the show in terms of catchy dialogue and fun interactions. It's not a show that takes itself seriously, which is ironic given how many dark characters are at the root of the series. It's fun and pulpy, as it should be. The Harley Quinn series quickly expands upon the universe by introducing characters like Scarecrow, Bane, Penguin, and more. Bane is one to watch out for, as his voice actor is hilarious, and Bane is one of the funnier characters. It's a real juxtaposition to take this intimidating, muscly giant and give him a ridiculous voice and humorous dialogue. There's a whole network of criminals that's really interesting to explore. Another fun character is Kite Man, who acts as a basis for conflict between Harley and Ivy. I should also add that recently Kite Man was given his own trailer for a spin-off show called Kite Man Hell Yeah, so I hope that show does well as a spin-off to this one. Kite Man is a pretty ridiculous character who is basically a B- villain for Batman. He doesn't have any special talent except the fact he glides on a kite, which makes his ridiculous character fitting for this very extreme show. Kite Man's very cringy, but he clearly has a good heart. He's obviously also interested in Ivy, who starts to care for him. It sounds so ridiculous on paper to see Ivy working with Kite Man, a character I didn't know of until this show, but it's great that the show keeps giving you life to characters in DC's history, and subverting expectations once again. You'd immediately expect Harvey and Ivy to get together. Instead, she gets with this dorky character. Notably, Kite Man crops up later in the show, which adds greatly to Ivy's story beyond Harley. It makes sense as Ivy's pretty rational, whereas Harley just continues with her scheming. Eventually, Ivy goes on a date with Kite Man, and while Kite Man's very upfront about himself, Ivy's insecurity creeps in. She conceals herself in order to avoid public embarrassment, which is unfortunate and pretty disrespectful. She's dating Kite Man, but clearly believes she's out of his league on some subconscious level. This causes some pretty interesting conflict between the two that really hurts Kite Man's feelings. However, it's later resolved. Kite Man isn't traditionally the type of person Ivy would date, but she opens up to Kite Man, eventually becoming his girlfriend. At this stage, Kite Man and Ivy are both inexperienced, but their relationship is really sweet. I do feel this content was pretty touching and could have had more focus, but Harley is the protagonist here, and for good reason. Later on, Ivy hides the fact that Kite Man is her boyfriend in front of Harley, showcasing how much she's grown to care for Harley. When Harley does realise that Ivy's dating Kite Man, she's pretty negative on this reveal, derived from clear jealousy, as she is actually in love with Ivy herself, but hasn't fully admitted it to herself. In the second season, Harley's jealousy is shown a lot more. The show doesn't yet give away that this comes from a place of romance, but the hints are definitely there. Harley definitely feels undermined by Kite Man, attempting to sabotage the relationship when Ivy's not around. Understandably, Harley feels a great deal towards Ivy given their history, but I feel this means an opportunity not taken. I love the relationship that later blossoms between Harley and Ivy, but at this stage it's pretty hard to see Kite Man so high in hope. It conveys that Harley's more considerate of her own feelings than Ivy's, because at this stage Ivy is currently happy and in love with Kite Man. This kind of jealous sabotage is pretty ugly to see, despite Harley's supervillain status. We'd hope that our friends would be happy for us when we are happy, even if it comes at a cost to them. Obviously, when Ivy's feelings towards Harley become clear, I don't really have a problem with this behaviour, but it is sad to see befall an unsuspecting Kite Man, who really did nothing wrong. If Kite Man hadn't been part of Season 1, this would probably have played a lot easier with me, but I suppose villains are allowed to make selfish decisions, and that's part of the fun of the show. By episode 4, Kite Man and Ivy become engaged, and although Harley puts on a happy face, she's clearly subconsciously saddened. Villainy temporarily takes her mind off this. I feel like this shows how stagnant Harley's life is beyond her relationship with Ivy, so it makes a lot of sense why she's so jealous. Ivy is the only person she truly cares for in a very lonely Gotham. Someone who saw something in a B-tier villain and tried. The idea of Ivy living with Kite Man is simply a very lonely prospect to Harley, and this idea is reinforced by their wedding plans throughout the season, creating gripping drama throughout. In episode 7, Ivy and Harley kiss after cathartically escaping imprisonment. This is where the Kite Man plot begins to make a lot more sense in relation to how it pushes Harley, as her arc starts to become a lot more clear. It's an emotional moment, but also carries a lot of baggage that we anticipate being resolved. Following this, there's a lot of embarrassment after their kiss, and awkwardness surrounding the subject. Ivy is reluctant to admit her feelings at this stage, still being tied to Kite Man, but Harley is clearly just agreeing to protect her feelings. There's also a lot of nice development for Kite Man, such as meeting his superpowered parents as his relationship with Harley eases into the next step. Ivy isn't going along for the ride. She stands up to Kite Man's parents and clearly does have strong feelings towards him. So it could have really went either way. It's a really tragic plotline that's well executed, and the show balances this storyline very well. These kinds of plot threads later encourage Harley to tell Ivy her true feelings, inspired by other villains' ability to love. When Kite Man discovers Harley and Ivy's racy acts, it puts all the drama on the line for the finale. It feels very out of place that Kite Man still wants to marry Ivy after this revelation. Yes, he feels lucky to have an amazing woman like Ivy, but his feelings don't seem as hurt as I'd expect. The story seems to go through with this for drama over realistic characterization. It's a little cliche and a pretty predictable place to take the story, as we all know Harley and Ivy are going to get together eventually, so I feel like the finale could have skipped straight to that. However, it does make a good cliffhanger. Basically, Ivy's wedding goes through multiple mishaps, and Kite Man recognises Ivy's not in it when saying her marriage vows. He maturely moves on from a love that wasn't wholly unrequited, and Harley and Ivy finally get together. It's an episode that's both sad and happy, but I do think this conveys how open Kite Man is, despite his hurt feelings. The season ends with Harley and Ivy on the run, fittingly in a just-married car. The Harley-Ivy romance doesn't come out of nowhere, the show builds up to this climax over 2 seasons. Prior to this, Harley and Ivy settle with one another, whether by making tea and watching TV together, or going over what layer to buy like it's some holiday home. These acts are something you don't really picture when thinking of these kinds of characters, but it makes sense that they have love like heroes do. Harley's an extremely messed up person, and it's conveyed that Ivy is really the glue that keeps her together. The show really shows the beauty of friendship, a friendship that naturally develops into a deep romance. When we think of connection, we typically think of love and friendship. Though Harley finds romantic love in Ivy, she also befriends a community of villains in the show. Early on, we see Harley begin to put together a dysfunctional family of villains. I love that we get to see the process behind the scenes on being such a criminal. From going to a corporate select-your-own-villain building to rallying up troops at a local bar. Unlike the Joker, Harley gets down and dirty to make herself known, putting real effort into building up her reputation. She goes to the unloved and less appreciated villains, showing them some of the consideration that Ivy did. The show really widens the behind the scenes on being such a villain, and the parts you might think would be less entertaining actually add to the workplace comedy feel. Harley's eventual team consists of Dr. Psycho, Clayface, King Shark, and Frank. Yes, he's just called Frank. Basically, Harley groups together criminal outcasts you wouldn't expect to band together. Whereas the first 2 episodes were very Ivy-focused, this new group offers more characters to play with to keep Harley's side of the story engaging. It also conveys that the show knows when to turn off the spotlight on certain characters, excluding perhaps the Joker. Dr. Psycho is very close-minded and grumpy, whereas Clayface is enthusiastic and vital. They work well as contrasting characters. I feel like the show also does a lot of good work on Dr. Psycho. Dr. Psycho starts off as a selfish misogynist, but an episode that delves into his family life really grounds the character. He comes to terms with his son, who clearly isn't happy to see him. We see that Psycho has some empathy deep down, offering some redeeming qualities for the character. It allows hope that he'll continue to become a better person, or not since he's a villain. It's very difficult because these kinds of scenes are very human but also detract from some of the villainy. How do you make a character relatable if you don't show that they actually care? They simply got on the wrong side of good and evil but are treated with a certain depth. Not every character has this depth, but those kinds of scenes showcase a potential in the show beyond crazy plots, such as with Gordon too. I'd say Clayface is a particular highlight. He's my favourite character as a flamboyant actor, bringing a similar energy as Bane, but with a real elegance. We get to see Clayface's acting inspirations put to good use, and it's visually creative to see him transform. Clayface offers great visual and audible humour as he changes character. Despite being a big brown blob, he has a very refined sensibility that's unique, and his craft will be employed in many future situations. Harley's upcomer status means she has a longer journey to build up her reputation and recruit henchmen, but the show conveys why it's engaging to see this development as she pursues personal goals. It shows Harley grow as she attempts to make a name for herself within the criminal underworld. One thing I do think the show is lacking is Harley planning villainous schemes. The show started off well with heavy character development, so you'd hope this new team spelt more of the villainous side to balance out the show. Harley becomes determined to find a nemesis, which means the show becomes more generalised, focusing more on reputation over criminal activity. Importantly, Harley learns to put her dysfunctional villain family before that reputation, showcasing remarkable growth as a character. She comes to realise that her reputation doesn't actually matter, but Ivy and her criminal misfits do, becoming a family of sorts. The heart and character development makes this show brilliant. Fundamentally, the show tells a story of a character getting over an abusive relationship, finding a healthy friendship, and developing a unique and supportive family. There's so many edgy animated shows out there, leading with two broken characters just mending each other, and following Harley's emotional rollercoaster is simply a great arc. The show isn't perfect, but these arcs are what make it worth watching. As with any show, the relationships are key. I could delve more into the third season, or even the fourth, but mainly I wanted to talk about the first two and Harley's arc with Ivy. I would like to give a special thank you to Starfleet Boy for becoming a new patron. You can find him at Starfleet Sohail on YouTube and Twitter. If you liked this video, please subscribe and consider joining Patreon. Links are in the description below.